Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Warren Klein. I'm the curator of the Herbert and Eileen Bernard Museum here at Temple Emmanuel, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the opening of our new exhibition at the Crossroads of Sefarad in the footsteps of the crypto Jews. And as many of you know, it's really a special evening too because we are reopening our museum after 2 years. So, okay, thanks. Well, I want to give you a hand too because it's really a pleasure to welcome you all here. Your presence makes the museum alive, and it's really such a special moment for me to see as well. So thank you for being here. Thanks to my colleagues, Dr. Gadi Levy and the Stryker Center team, and as well as the Temple staff. Special thank you to Shula Bahat and her team at ANU and Dr. Isaac Aman from the Jewish Heritage Alliance for being here this evening. Other special thanks to Dr. Ira Rizak, Yoram Biton, and the staff of the Clow Library at the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. They had kindly, in a very short notice, lent us many of their treasures to complement the exhibition. And just a reminder, we are limiting our capacity of the museum and other spaces at the temple this evening, so there will be another opportunity to view the exhibition after our remarks. But please be patient with us. So we are limited to about 80 people at a time. So I encourage you all to come back. Sunday through Thursday, our museum will be open 10:30 to 4:30, and the exhibition will be on view through the end of August. So if you can't make it tonight, there's plenty of time. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my colleague Shula from ANU.
Good evening, everybody. As Warren just said, just to see so many people in one room, I want to compliment you. I stand here for you because we endured and overcame 2 very difficult years. And to see you here is really a great pleasure, very great pleasure, especially for a cultural event that came together relatively quickly. I want to tell you who I am just very briefly. My name is Shulamit Bahat, and I represent in North America ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People. Many of you may know it as Beit Hatfutsot, the Museum of the Diaspora. But we changed the name to ANU to reflect a different vision of the relationships between American Jews, world Jewry, I should say, Israelis and Israel, to reflect the fact that we are actually one people that we knew. No geographical borders stand between us, but we are also equal. There is no one community that is more important than the other. And that kind of message coming from Israel, we thought will be an important message for the future, for the years to come, especially for young people who are more and more, as you know, are distancing themselves from who we are and what they are. The partnership with this particular center is quite long-ranging. I think it's at least 10 years. And we have done lots of things together here. And if you're members of this temple, you may have seen Boi Kala, Here Comes the Bride, which was an exhibition that we brought to this museum. And we collaborated on many other projects. And this project is very dear to our heart. And it's also something that captures the vision, the mission of both the Stryker Center and ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People, because it tells a unique story about a unique community, and it's a story that is still going on. And later on, you will hear more about it. I'm sure you'd know a lot about it, but you will hear certain things that many of us did not know, and we discovered as this exhibition was put together. The other thing that I think is unique about this event is that the exhibition is actually digital. We send it to those places who want to show it, and they then, with our help and with our advice, create an exhibition that suits their space. And as you saw, those of you who were upstairs and those of you who will go later on, we'll see that it is it is perfect for the Bernard Judaica Museum because it was created in that in mind, that is, that you could fit any space, basically. I want to tell you a few things about ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People. But before I do, I want to recognize my colleague, Gloria Golan, who is the director of the American Friends of Beit Hatfutsot, and without whom I probably would not exist. I could say that. So the museum is based in Tel Aviv and went through, in the last 10 years, the last decade, through a strategic change, a strategic plan that reflects what I told you earlier about the vision that we have of Jewish life, of Jewish communities, and world Jewry, and the relationship of world Jewry with Israel. And we changed the name to ANU, which means we, us, to reflect that, what I told you earlier, to reflect that change, that really there is no difference between those who live in New York and those who live in Tel Aviv. And if there is a difference, there should be a difference. I mean, we are diverse people. But nonetheless, we are united. And that's the key. And that is something that we have to remember and we have to instill in our children, in our grandchildren, and in ourselves. And the museum now is the largest Jewish museum in the world. It is 72,000 square feet just of galleries, just of the exhibition place, and I'm not talking about all of the other platforms that we have, because ANU is more than a museum. It is really a cultural center. I would say it is a culture of Jewish civilization. And in addition to the museum, we have a school, we have a genealogy center, Jewish genealogy center, actually the first Jewish genealogy center in the world. We have a visual center. We have films, photos. We have, if you want to know the origin of your name, this is the place to go to because you will learn about yourself things that you may have not known. So it is really trying to touch upon every aspect of Jewish history, because the most important thing that we do is we tell the entire story of the Jewish people, the millennia-long story of the Jewish people, from the beginning into the future. And we try to appeal to people of all backgrounds and all faiths, not just Jews, and all ages. And we pay special attention to the next generations, to children, to high school kids, to university students, because the future is with them. I want to tell you that this particular exhibition was the initiative of a relatively new organization, the Jewish Heritage Alliance, which is totally dedicated to the history of the Jews from the Iberian island, but not just to their history, it's also to their present and the future. Because as you know, in 1492, as a result of the Inquisition, many Jews had to convert to Catholicism, otherwise they would have been jailed or killed. And many Jews basically were expelled if they didn't want to do it, and they dispersed all over the world. All over the world. And today there are millions upon millions of people who still keep traditions, Jewish traditions, and later on you'll hear more about it, but they're not Jewish. And the idea behind this was not only to tell the story of a very mysterious, shredded in intrigue and mystery about Jews, but also to find those people among them that would like to come back to Judaism. Of course, you know that we don't convert people unless they want to, but that was a major idea. The major idea is to take that part of history and make it alive again. And that is the role of the Jewish Heritage Alliance. And later on, you will hear from Dr. Isaac Amon, who is the research director and the program director of that organization. One bit before I introduce him, there was one thing that I wanted to tell you, and that has to do with how I discover who I am and my identity. I don't know how many of you read the book Daniel Deronda or saw the film or the series. Okay, so good. By George Eliot. And that book, which I read when I was maybe 14, changed my life. I couldn't leave it. I read it and read it again, and I was intrigued by the notion of people who are keeping discovering and exploring who they are. Of course, the book later on, I realized, was very much against anti-Semitism. But that I learned later on. Initially, I was very taken by the character, Daniel Deronda, by his adventures, and his marriage in the end to a Jewish woman who was hiding her Judaism. And he discovered he himself is a Jew. And that, I have to say, captured my imagination. Later on, 2 years BC, before Corona, I decided to do a DNA test. And I discovered that on my mother's side, there is a pintele. Anybody here knows Yiddish? Okay, a little bit of a Sephardi Jew. And my mother and one of my siblings, I have 4, always looked different than the rest of us. They had dark hair and dark eyes. And when I discovered it, I have to say, I felt all of a sudden that something in me was waiting for that. I'm telling it to you because each and every one of you should find who you are, and there are ways today to find who you are. And tell your kids the family stories. That's the biggest gift that you can give yourself and to your children and grandchildren. Tell them the family story. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Isaac Amon, who is the Director of Academic Research and Program Development at the Jewish Heritage Alliance. He is a first-generation American whose parental ancestors originated in the 15th century Spain before leaving the Iberian Peninsula due to the expulsion of Jews in 1492. Over the centuries, following their arrival in the Ottoman Empire, they served as chief rabbis, diplomats, and physicians to the sultans. And one of the pictures upstairs on the second floor in the exhibition is one of Isaac's ancestors, and he will tell you more about it. Dr. Amon graduated with honors in the subject of medieval history with a focus on the Iberian Inquisition. He earned his law degree, the JD, in comparative law, criminal procedure, and legal history, all from the Washington University in St. Louis. In a way, he combined his knowledge of history, his legal experience and expertise, which he learned later on, embellished in places like Sorbonne. He combined all of these and brought it to the organization I mentioned earlier, the Alliance of the Jewish Heritage Alliance. As I look at Dr. Amon, I'm saying to myself, he may have studied medieval history, but he is a Renaissance man. And without further ado, Isaac.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Warren and Shula, for the invitation and introduction. Clergy and trustees, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening of this specially curated exhibit at the Crossroads of Sefarad and the Footsteps of the Crypto-Jews. Notwithstanding its profound and enduring consequences, the story of Sefarad, or Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, has rarely been recognized in traditional educational curricula, popular awareness, and the familiar annals of Jewish and world history. It is therefore an honor to be here with you this evening in person on opening night at your renowned institution and landmark temple, Emmanuel El, one of the largest synagogues in the world. I represent Jewish Heritage Alliance, JHA, a 501c3 organization, and a global platform comprised of nearly 50 strategic and affiliate partners, including communities, universities, institutions, and individuals in both public and private sectors. We are dedicated to promoting the legacy of Sefarad to the world at large via initiatives such as on-site exhibits, online webinars, and tour programs that help bring the past to life. We are proud that this exhibit has been created in partnership with the Tel Aviv-based Anu Museum of the Jewish People, which tells the ongoing and extraordinary story of the Jewish people. It is fitting and proper that the first public showing or debut of this exhibit in the United States occurs in the Bernard Museum of Judaica at the Temple Emmanuel El Stryker Center, whose objective is to offer programs that spark curiosity, engage the intellect, and infuse our lives with rich Jewish culture. This exhibit magnificently depicts, as many of you have seen and others will see, the ancient, vibrant, and ongoing story of Sefarad, particularly that of crypto-Jews in whose footsteps we walk tonight. Now, since time immemorial, the phenomenon of crypto-Judaism, or practicing key rituals and traditions of Judaism in secret, has spanned cultures, religions, oceans, and continents. Perhaps the most famous crypto-Jew in history was Queen Esther, the heroine whose powerful story we commemorated last week in the holiday of Purim. Forced to conceal her identity, generations of hidden Jews took solace from her example, confident the Almighty would redeem them from the lands of persecution and restore them to the children of Israel. Religious identity is complex and incredibly nuanced. Not every single converso or Jewish convert to Catholicism was a crypto-Jew. Some converted voluntarily and became assimilators or devout Catholics. Others became Christian reformers. A smaller subset vacillated in between Judaism and Christianity, whilst the smallest minority came to reject organized religion altogether, such as Uriel Acosta and Baruch Spinoza. Now, the traditional term for all Sephardic Jews forced to convert to Catholicism, along with their descendants, is conversos, or new Christians, regardless of whether they secretly practiced Jewish rituals and traditions. As for Judaizers, or crypto-Jews, who tried to remain faithful to their ancestral traditions, the historical term has been Marranos. Although utilized in historical works, this epithet is pejorative, meaning swine, and has been steadily abandoned in contemporary usage. In its place, anusim, also translated as a spiritual rape, is sometimes used. It acknowledges that the converts' freedom of conscience was violated, and they did not abandon Judaism of their own free will. For these reasons, anusim and crypto-Jews are increasingly favored today when discussing this subset of Jewish converts to Catholicism. And now let us begin our great journey across time and space. Long-standing tradition places the arrival of Jews in the Iberian Peninsula around 3,000 years ago during the reign of King Solomon, the builder of the first temple, or Beit HaMikdash, in Jerusalem. Regardless of the exact date of first arrival, the documentary and archaeological record provides compelling evidence for the existence of a widespread communal Jewish presence in Spain and Portugal by the first few centuries of the Common Era during the heyday of the Roman Empire. By the end of late antiquity, long-settled Iberian Jewish communities were well known across the Mediterranean world and recognized as far away as the Middle East. Following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE, the Visigoths, a Germanic tribe, became the masters of Iberia. After formally converting from Arian Christianity to Catholicism under King Recared in the late 6th century, anti-Jewish legislation was proclaimed almost immediately. A succession of ecclesiastical synods or church councils held in Toledo restricted Jewish liberties, confiscated Jewish properties, and mandated the forcible baptism of children born to mixed marriages of Jews and Christians. Most portentously, in 613, Recared's successor, King Sigismund, ordered the conversion or expulsion en masse of all Jewish communities from his kingdom, and it has been estimated that this decree affected as many as 90,000 Jews. The majority appear to have submitted to nominal baptism, while others fled abroad to France and North Africa. In 653 or so, the law code of the Visigoths, known as the Lex Visigothrum, was promulgated. Revered as one of the great codes of law in legal history, it proscribed, however, Jewish observances of Shabbat, circumcision, and the dietary laws, or the kashrut. It then decreed that, quote, Jews, whether baptized or not, are forbidden to testify in court, And so this so-called racialization of religion transformed the course of Jewish, Christian, and Iberian history by identifying Jewish converts as quote-unquote new Christians, or Cristianos Nuevos in Spanish, to distinguish them from old Christians, Cristianos Viejos. Judaism thus came to be seen by the outside society as innately biological, which can never be erased by the ritual of baptism. And so the thousands of Jewish converts to Catholicism during the reign of King Sigismund were placed in a completely new category, officially viewed as Catholic, but regarded with suspicion on account of their ancestry. Many, if not most, clandestinely held fast to the faith of their fathers in the face of immense persecution. Although many details remain obscure to us today, this time period gave birth to the crypto-Jewish phenomenon in Iberian history. In 711, Muslim forces under the leadership of Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, for whom it is named, and overran within a few years the Visigothic kingdom. The zenith of Muslim-Jewish collaboration began in the 10th century under the Umayyad Caliphate, with its magnificent capital at Cordoba and Al-Andalus, or the south of Spain. Jews became well represented in many occupations, such as medicine, commerce, science, and crafts. As a result of this milieu, the golden age of Sefarad arose, marked by the brilliant efflorescence in the 200 years or so from the 10th to the 12th century. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all children of the biblical patriarch Abraham or Avraham Avinu, worked together in various fields of human endeavor, such as mathematics and architecture, history and philosophy, poetry and astronomy, searching for an underlying truth common to them all. This is not to say that no tensions existed or that persecutions were absent. They did occur, as they do in every society. But it was a unique atmosphere in which considerable accomplishments were made. Ancient communities in Sefarad were rejuvenated, and the geographic, cultural, and numerical center of world Jewry shifted there. The first extraordinary individual who emerged in this time period was Hasdai ibn Shaprut, who acted as vizier to Caliph Abdul Rahman III and corresponded with the Khazar Empire in Central Asia, which adopted Judaism en masse. This was immortalized in the Kuzari by the author, poet, and philosopher Judah Halevi. Other key figures included the poet Solomon ibn Gabirol, Samuel Hanagid, a Talmudic scholar, poet, and commander of Muslim armies, and Moses ben Maimon, or Maimonides. The life of this exceptional scholar, legal codifier, physician, and philosopher served as a most fitting tribute to the Golden Age, aptly summed up by the epitaph on his tomb in Tiberias, or Tiberia, from Moses the lawgiver to Moses Maimonides, there was none like Moses. Eventually, this epoch in interfaith collaboration reached its end. The Umayyad Caliphate collapsed as the gradual Christian reconquest of Spain began, as well as successive invasions by puritanical Islamic movements from North Africa. In the mid-12th century, the Almohads compelled Jews to convert to Islam, leave or be killed. Many Jews left, including Maimonides and his family, who eventually found refuge in Cairo. Others converted to Islam to remain and continued to covertly practice Jewish rites and rituals, perpetuating the Iberian crypto-Jewish phenomenon, which originated in the days of the Visigoths. Christian kingdoms and principalities in the north unified and reclaimed territory from the Muslims in a process known as the Reconquista. And by the mid-13th century, the last bastion of Iberian soil, which remained under the crescent, was the Kingdom of Granada, located in the south of Spain, or Al-Andalus. Some enlightened Christian rulers reigned at that time, such as Alfonso X, the Wise, El Sabio, as he was known, who styled himself king of the three religions. During his reign, Jews helped to translate works from Hebrew, Arabic, and Latin into the Castilian vernacular. Thereafter, the position of Jews markedly deteriorated. The mid-14th century witnessed the Black Death, the greatest pandemic in history, which killed between 1/3 and 60% of the European population within a few short years. Hundreds of Jewish communities were infamously scapegoated, vilified, and massacred across the continent. Many survivors migrated eastward into the Kingdom of Poland under Kazimierz Wielki, or Casimir III the Great, who welcomed Jews to settle in his realm, and many of their descendants remained there until the ravages of the Holocaust or Shoah. Spanish Jewry was not spared this violence, setting the prelude for an even greater disaster which occurred in 1391. That year saw bloodshed, pillage, and massacre across the length and breadth of Spain, from the Pyrenees to the Straits of Gibraltar. It has been estimated that this appalling carnage resulted in the murder of 50,000 to 100,000 Jews who occupied every stratum of society. Yet the most profound effect of this tragedy, perhaps, was that tens of thousands of Jews were forced to choose between the cross and the sword. Most thronged to the baptismal fonts to save their lives and those of their children. Most new Christians, however, still practice Jewish rites and rituals in the privacy of their homes and retain fidelity to their ancestral faith, often continuing to live alongside their former co-religionists. By 1415 or so, Spanish Jewry lay prostrate and was but a shell of its former self. Perhaps one-third of them had been converted, one-third had been slain, and only one-third remained. Attention now focused upon these new Christians, who were increasingly viewed as, quote, Jews in all but name and Christians in nothing but form. These conversos, shorn of earlier social and economic restrictions they had faced as professing Jews, rapidly rose to the highest ranks of society in many disciplines, including business, government, the judiciary, and even the church itself. In 1449, the city of Toledo institutionalized discrimination for the first time against Jewish converts and progeny on the racial grounds of blood purity, known in Spanish as limpieza de sangre. Reminiscent of the Lex Visigothrum's racialization of religion 7 centuries earlier, individuals of Jewish descent were prohibited from occupying public or private office unless they could prove up to 4 generations of non-Jewish blood. Despite the Pope's condemnation and the king's revocation of the law, it marked a key turning point. Conversos were now seen as forever having a Jewish taint, regardless of how many generations passed since the initial conversion. And it's against such a background that the Iberian Inquisition emerged. In 1478, Pope Sixtus IV authorized the Spanish Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, to appoint inquisitors to ferret out a particular type of heresy, Judaizing, or practicing Judaism in secret. This papal decision had immense consequences, lasting nearly 3.5 centuries across 5 continents. The institution it spawned would change the world. In 1481, the Spanish Inquisition commenced its task of ferreting out the most pernicious form of heresy, crypto-Judaism. According to the chronicler Andres Bernaldez, by the end of the Inquisition's first decade of existence, the 1480s, even prior to the expulsion of Jews, more than 700 conversos were condemned to the stake, and at least 5,000 were reconciled to the church after undergoing various forms of penance. This was but a taste of the persecutions which were to come. On January 2nd, 1492, the forces of Ferdinand and Isabella conquered Granada, thus completing the Reconquista and ending nearly 800 years of Islamic rule on the Iberian Peninsula. Desiring to unite Spain under the Catholic faith, continued Jewish presence threatened that key objective. The stage was thus set for arguably the greatest calamity to befall the Jewish people, between the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE and the Holocaust or Shoah in the 1930s and 40s, still within our living memory. On March 31st, 1492, the Edict of Expulsion was signed in Granada, also referred to as the Alhambra Decree, as it was signed in the Alhambra, that splendid palace and fortress at the base of the Sierra Nevada Mountains, which is today a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This decree commanded all Jews, men and women, old and young, rich and poor, to vacate their ancestral homeland of 1,500 to 2,000 years by the end of July 1492, a mere 4 months later. The deadline was extended a few days to August 2nd, corresponding to Tisha B'Av, the great day of lamentation on our liturgical calendar, adding the expulsion of Sephardic Jewry to the unfathomable list of tragedies which have occurred in Jewish history. Estimates of the numbers of Spanish exiles range widely, from hundreds of thousands to a much more modest 40,000, and certainly if passed as prologue, the great persecutions, massacres, and number of converts, particularly over the century since 1391, makes higher estimates seem extraordinary, but notwithstanding which figure we take, the widespread consensus is that only about half the remaining Jews departed Spain. The other half converted to Catholicism to remain in the only land they knew. A global Sephardic diaspora thus emerged within the already existing Jewish dispersion, further scattering their descendants to the ends of the earth. Half departed the Iberian Peninsula entirely and ventured to the Dar al-Islam, or the lands of Islam in North Africa, and to the eastern Mediterranean, controlled by the Ottoman Empire, ruled by Sultan Bayezid II, who welcomed the exiles to settle in his dominions. Famous cities included Thessaloniki or Salonika, Istanbul, Izmir, and Turkey, those in the Balkans, such as Monastir, today's Bitola, Skopje, and Belgrade. The other half of Spanish exiles remained on the Iberian Peninsula and entered the neighboring kingdom of Portugal, as it had a similar culture, climate, and language, and the distance is not very far. Although Sefarad was recreated in miniature around the globe and across the centuries via memory, language, culture, cuisine, and music, the unity of Sefarad was torn asunder. While expulsions had previously occurred in European history, it was nothing comparable in scale or scope to 1492 Spain. where tens to hundreds of thousands of Jews were evicted from their ancestral homeland in a matter of months. It was an abrupt historical cataclysm. The Iberian crypto-Jewish story was not over, and in fact, its greatest journeys lay ahead. Less than 5 years after finding refuge in Portugal, in December 1496, King Manuel I ordered all Jews to depart his dominions in a bid to wed Isabella, a daughter of the neighboring Spanish monarchs. And in the spring of 1497, 20,000 Jews or so wished to depart Portugal, as many of them had Spain. They arrived in Lisbon seeking ships on which to leave. Instead, Manuel ordered them all forcibly baptized. No choice was given. And so at once, the entire normative Jewish community disappeared, becoming the new Christian community. The Portuguese state actively attempted at that point to extirpate the remembrance of Judaism. Synagogues and schools were closed, prayer books and ritual objects were confiscated, and cemeteries were even uplifted. This condemnation of memory, sometimes referred to as a damnatio memoriae, has been described as a religiocide, the annihilation of a faith. And this accordingly marks a significant difference between crypto-Jewish experiences in Spain and Portugal. Spain witnessed numerous waves of forced conversions, beginning with the 7th century Visigothic king Sigismund, as well as openly professing Jewish communities existing alongside conversos. In Portugal, by contrast, there was one mass conversion, committed rather suddenly and forcefully. And this distinction was to have grave consequences for the future of crypto-Jews and Sephardic history. For sanctified principles are not easily discarded. The number of insincere converts drastically increased as new Christians were forbidden from leaving Portugal in 1499, and the Portuguese Inquisition did not officially arrive in the country until 1536, 4 decades after the 1497 forced conversion. In stark contrast, the Spanish tribunal had operated ruthlessly for over a decade before the Jews were expelled in 1492. And so this combination of factors made Portuguese crypto-Judaism much more resilient and nearly impossible to eradicate, in contrast to what had effectively occurred in Spain by the mid-16th century. By 1580, when the Iberian Union, a dynastic merger of Spain and Portugal, was formed, the borders between the two Iberian kingdoms became permeable, and thousands of Portuguese crypto-Jews, or new Christians, entered the larger country before fleeing the Iberian Peninsula altogether. Spanish inquisitorial records note a resurgence of suspected Judaizers or crypto-Jews at that time, and most of the accused were of Portuguese origin. Crypto-Judaism may have faded in Spain, but Portuguese crypto-Jews maintained the faith in Iberia and eventually around the world. But by the end of the 15th century, Judaism as a living, breathing faith officially no longer existed on the Iberian Peninsula in the biblical Sefarad. Accordingly, the people of the book, a term often referred to Jews, became people of memory. Judaism went underground and became an oral transmission of knowledge centered around rituals and the home. Women, traditional keepers of the domicile, became the primary guardians of the faith, transmitting knowledge to the next generation. And indeed, inquisitorial records from the tribunal in Toledo in Spain document that even by 1530 or so, 75% of teachers of crypto-Judaism were women. The Inquisition was cognizant of this and thus came to focus their surveillance upon converso mothers and daughters. While it seems inevitable that all adherence to normative Judaism would fade once the generations who had known the faith firsthand died out, we must remember that in Iberia and her overseas colonies, daily discourse, physical landscape, and mental universe were permeated with Catholic imagery. And lacking sustained connection with normative Jewish communities, a converso religious world was created with its own calendar, customs, and beliefs, really shaped by the larger Catholic milieu. However, against all odds, collective memory and oral transmission helped to preserve core principles of belief, which came down to the following 5. First, unity of the deity, monotheism. Second, belief in the law of Moses. Third, observance of the commandments was required. Fourth, Judaism was the preferred faith. And fifth, the Messiah has yet to come. All precepts of traditional Judaism. For this reason, the traditional school of thought has avowed that conversos and Jews were one people, united by bonds of religion, destiny, and messianic hope. Others, paralleling Jean-Paul Sartre's argument that it's anti-Semitism that creates the Jew, asserted the Inquisition intentionally or inadvertently created crypto-Jews by constantly reminding them of their Jewish heritage. Far from eradicating a Jewish identity, inquisitorial persecution, paradoxically perhaps, played a key role in sustaining it and ensured that conversos remained attached to their former brethren. And indeed, more than religious belief, a sense of solidarity based on nationhood or common origin bonded these Portuguese conversos around the globe as members of the Portuguese nation, La Nación, or the Nação. The late Professor David Gitlitz, a man I was privileged to call mentor, wrote in his magnum opus, Secrecy and Deceit, The Religion of the Crypto-Jews, that whether they were Judaizers or assimilators, the twin pressures of the Inquisition and purity of blood laws forced all conversos to become adept at donning publicly acceptable masks. Each converso perched on his own shoulder and watched himself act. Each became at once the protagonist and author of his own fictionalized autobiography. Anusim or crypto-Jews seem to have relied upon three primary coping strategies: concealing, dissembling, and misdirecting, manifested in observance of traditional religious rituals. Major life ceremonies and practices were impacted. Circumcision and ritual slaughtering, for most quite simply, were too readily identifiable and fell by the wayside over the ages. Strict compliance to dietary laws was also curtailed, for the purchase of certain foods or spices at certain times of the week or year could alert neighbors to the possible stench of heresy. The most prominent example involved the pig, a key part of the Iberian diet. For most conversos, even those who became sincere Catholics, any contact with pork, smelling it, using lard in cooking, and of course consumption of the flesh remained repugnant. Any perceived abhorrence towards it, what might be called porcophobia perhaps, became identified by the Inquisition as the sine qua non of nonconformity to Catholic orthodoxy. Shabbat candles were lit on Friday nights behind closed doors. Blessings recited over them are easily committed to memory and hence persisted in oral tradition with little to no change across the centuries. The Passover Seder commemorating the Exodus from Egypt was held on a different date than the 15th of Nisan. In many cases, adherence to Judaic practices was symptomatic, perhaps a cultural affinity or nostalgia for their former faith and traditions, but nonetheless practice of these rituals was heretical, according to inquisitors, for action indicated one's true intent. Other rituals were disguised as Christian traditions or given a Christian veneer, eventually leading to syncretism of Jewish and Christian traditions, such as the communal veneration of Queen Esther, who became canonized as Santa Esterica. Others sometimes used the pretext of a saint's birthday in order to celebrate the Sabbath. The third type of coping strategy, misdirection, involved going to Mass, for example, but not praying, or concluding Catholic prayers in the name of only the Father, omitting the Son and the Holy Spirit, emphasizing the core belief in the unity of the deity while simultaneously ensuring that old Christian neighbors noticed them. Regardless of their exact religious beliefs, however, descendants of Iberian New Christians transformed the course of history with their migrations. This presentation cannot examine in greater detail today due to limited time, but briefly, reverting to the open practice of Judaism, these descendants resuscitated a Jewish presence in vast parts of Europe. After previous massacres, expulsions, and conversions, they founded Spanish and Portuguese synagogues and communities in major cities, including Amsterdam, Bayonne, Bordeaux, Hamburg, and London, and rejoined their former co-religionists in the Italian Peninsula and the Ottoman Empire. Most courageously, they accompanied or followed soon upon the travels of Iberian explorers such as Christopher Columbus, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, and Ferdinand Magellan. The pattern of finding haven and founding communities and synagogues was replicated in the New World by Iberian Christians, new Christians, who journeyed and settled there in large numbers, ranging from Mexico and Central America to Brazil and the Caribbean, including Dutch Guiana, now called Suriname, Jamaica, Barbados, and Curacao. Spanish crypto-Jews found refuge in New Spain, encompassing Mexico, Florida, and the American Southwest, while Portuguese crypto-Jews created synagogues along the eastern seaboard of North America, including in Montreal, Canada, Newport, Rhode Island, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. In 1654, 23 Jews from Recife, Brazil, fleeing the Portuguese Inquisition, arrived in the Dutch colony of New Netherland, specifically the city of New Amsterdam. After overcoming Director General Peter Stuyvesant's opposition, they were admitted and formed Congregation Shereth Israel, viewed as the birth of American Jewish history, which stands to this day. When the English conquered the colony in 1664, they changed the city's name to New York. Sephardic Jewishness, encompassing open Jews and hidden Jews, thus created a global networking system around the world based upon extensive family, social, and commercial ties, connecting the Caribbean and Americas with the ancestral Iberian Peninsula, the Mediterranean world, the Ottoman Empire, and even Spanish and Portuguese colonies in Africa and Asia. These intersecting connections crossed religious, political, and cultural divides. And this network of contacts was so integral to the success of local economies that even Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism, acknowledged in his 1776 work, The Wealth of Nations, that it was Portuguese Jews, persecuted by the Inquisition, stripped of their fortunes, and banished to Brazil, who introduced the sugarcane and established the industry. Not content to watch this global spread of heresy continue unchecked, the Inquisitions in Spain and Portugal established subsidiary tribunals based in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and India, encircling their overseas colonies. These ranged from the Philippines to Mexico, the Atlantic world to Africa, and Brazil to the future United States. Subjected to unprecedented geographical and generational persecution, crypto-Jews died in the law of Moses, often burnt alive in the grand acts of faith or autos de fe staged in public fora around the world. Hopeful that the Almighty still considered them as part of the Jewish people and would forgive their souls for living a double life, many Anusim gave their lives. And this tenacious attachment to Jewish history and memory was manifested most powerfully, perhaps, during the First World War. In 1917, a Polish Jewish engineer, Samuel Schwartz, ventured into the north of Portugal for work. He encountered an individual, Baltazar Pereira de Souza, who, upon learning that Schwartz was Jewish, disclosed his crypto-Jewish identity. De Souza brought Schwartz to the mountainous village town of Belmonte and introduced him to the rezaderas, the old women who were the guardians of the tradition. Distrusting the outsider, it was only when Schwartz recited the Shema, the foundational creed of Jewish theology, and pronounced the divine name in Hebrew, that the old women covered their faces and said, "He knows the name of our Lord. He is one of us." The crypto-Jews of Belmonte had been entirely severed from contact with Jewish communities and believed they were the last remaining Jews on the planet. Upon realizing that Judaism survived elsewhere, Schwartz was welcomed into their midst and wrote a book detailing rituals and beliefs of the hidden community. The Portuguese army, Captain Artur Carlos de Barros Basto, leader of the Jewish community of Porto, made rather Herculean efforts to integrate the Belmonte crypto-Jews into normative Jewish practices and society. And in 2019, this story was vividly depicted in the film Sefarad, which is available on Amazon Prime. Modern-day stories of formerly hidden communities in Portugal, Spain, the American Southwest, and around the world stand as a testament to the crypto-Jewish desire to remain affiliated in the face of formidable odds with their ancestral faith, traditions, and people. Today's emerging communities are following in the footsteps of earlier generations who reverted to Judaism. Reminders, however, of forced conversions and inquisitorial persecution remain embedded in our DNA. In 2008, a study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics analyzed the Y chromosome communicated from father to son across the generations of over 1,100 men in Portugal, Spain, and the Balearic Islands. And researchers found that about 1 in 5, or 20%, are descended from Sephardic Jews. An even more groundbreaking study, published in 2018 in Nature Communications, found that nearly 1 in 4, or 25% of Latinos, are descended from Iberian New Christians, many of whom fled to the New World. These twin studies indicate that up to 200 million people around the world descend from Sephardic Jewish progenitors and are a key part of the ongoing story of Sefarad. Laws mandating racial purity, the Limpieza de Sangre statutes, distinguishing between Old and New Christian, were not ended in Portugal until 1773, the time of the American Revolution, nor in Spain until 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected president of our great country. It has been estimated that 300,000 people stood trial before the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions, and around 1.5 million people were hauled before those tribunals over the course of its lifetime. The Inquisitions were only abolished in Portugal in 1821 and in Spain in 1834. The Alhambra decree or edict of expulsion was not rescinded until 1968. And so the framers of the American Republic, cognizant that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, abhorred the continuing existence of these dreaded tribunals, a relic of a more primitive age, and thus enshrined constitutional bulwarks against its adoption or importation on American soil, especially as seen in the 1791 Bill of Rights added to the U.S. Constitution. Now, in this global city's very harbor, sits a colossal, neoclassical copper sculpture entitled The Statue of Liberty, Enlightening the World. On its pedestal are the words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." These words, composed by the 19th century poet Emma Lazarus, one of the most illustrious descendants of the original Portuguese Jews who arrived in this city in 1654, have welcomed generations of immigrants and refugees, including my maternal grandmother of blessed memory, who arrived at Ellis Island from the Ukraine in 1922, exactly 100 years ago. One family, which departed Granada in 1492, as Shula mentioned, included a young physician Joseph and his infant son Moses, who migrated to Constantinople. Joseph became advisor and physician to Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II and his son Selim I, while Joseph's son Moses, as seen here on the left, became a close confidant, diplomat, and physician to Selim's son, Suleiman the Magnificent, the longest-ruling Ottoman Sultan in history. An unwavering defender of his co-religionists, particularly against blood libels, and a generous patron of Jewish causes, Moses significantly intervened on behalf of Doña Gracia Nasi, perhaps the most famous crypto-Jew in medieval history, when she sought safety in Constantinople, as conversos were persecuted in the lands of Christendom, tragically exemplified by the burning of 24 crypto-Jews in the Italian city of Ancona. A visage, as Shula mentioned, of this iconic Ottoman physician and diplomat, recognizable with his long flowing dress and top hat, can be seen in this exhibit. And at least one branch of his descendants remained in Istanbul for centuries, until the late 1950s when they moved to Chicago. These were my paternal grandparents, Dr. Renee Isaac Amon and Mrs. Denise Nachman Amon, Alava Shalom, of blessed memory, and my father, Dr. Errol Amon. My family's decision to leave Granada 25 generations ago and depart into the unknown set in motion events leading to this very evening being possible. The world in which we live, ladies and gentlemen, has profoundly been shaped by the triumphs, trials, and tribulations of the Sephardic story. The key years of 1391, 1492, and 1497 made Iberian Jewry face existential challenges, yet each time it prevailed in different guises, preserving an attachment to the calls of history, memory, and legacy. Jews who went to North Africa, the Ottoman Empire, or remained on the Iberian Peninsula formed together the remarkable story of Sefarad, which this exhibit superbly depicts. Now, much more detail could be said on the many topics we've touched upon today. Indeed, any of them could be a lifetime of study, and certainly each of them their own lecture and presentation. But I'd like to leave you with the words of the late Cecil Roth, the 20th century scholar and editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Judaica. The record of the new Christians is an inseparable part of the stories of Spain and Portugal. It constitutes a fundamental chapter of ecclesiastical history. It touches on the life of every country of Western Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. It had important reactions in politics, literature, science, and commerce. And its appeal includes the unique devotion which could transmit the ancestral ideals unsullied from generation to generation, lador vador, despite the Inquisition and its horrors. And all this together, collectively, combined to make the crypto-Jewish story unparalleled in history for sheer dramatic appeal. Thank you again to the Bernard Museum of Judaica and Temple Emmanuel L. Stryker Center for the invitation to be here tonight. Enjoy the exhibition. It's a wonderful testament, again, to our beautiful Sephardic and shared Jewish heritage. And please feel free to contact me by email or phone with questions, comments, or suggestions. I encourage everyone to connect with Jewish Heritage Alliance to learn more about the Saga of Sefarad, and thank you again.
So ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to view the exhibition, you can head to the second floor. And just a reminder, we are limited in capacity. So if you can't join us this evening, you can feel free to come back Sunday through Thursday. Thank you again.